The Horse Race is brought to you by Benchmark Strategies, Boston's leading public affairs and public relations consulting firm. To learn more, connect with Benchmark on LinkedIn at Benchmark Strategies or visit benchmark-strategies.com. Welcome back to The Horse Race, your weekly look at politics, policy, and elections in Massachusetts. I'm Steve Casella, president of the Massing Polling Group, here with Jennifer Smith, reporter for Commonwealth Weekend, and it is Thursday, October 30th. Today, we're talking about a new type of Election Day poll, which will be a feature in upcoming elections, and then a roundup of mayoral elections and the features of those key races. Jen, as our listeners could tell from the intro music, it is Halloween, or will be Halloween tomorrow as people are listening to this.
That's right. I am once again haunted, not just by the concept of Halloween, but literally by my neighbors still having that giant skeleton, the ones that went absolutely viral. Every year I come on here and I explain that I get jump scared every time I leave my house, and I am here to tell you I am back in the jump scared every time I leave my house category.
Well, it is the season, Jen. You are emerging from your crypt, I'm assuming, to scare the children and like haunt their dreams and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
I actually don't know. Does your neighborhood do like candy and trick-or-treating and that sort of thing?
Yeah, so I'm in the Savin Hill area of Dorchester, and that means that one part of it has kind of, the big Victorian houses, so like the kids are really excited to kind of cycle through and trick-or-treat. And then there's the areas that are kind of, like rows and rows of three-deckers, which creates the interesting question every year. If I am not on the first floor, do I have an obligation to give a child candy?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. And in a single family home, if the lights are off, people generally know that there's no candy to be had there. But if there's three homes in one building, do they just come up and like ring all the doorbells and like wait and see who shows up with like a good and plenty or something?
Right. Well, we did actually get alarmed the other night because it is, as we're recording this, not yet Halloween. And yet we got a doorbell ring during the dinner hour. And we were like, what kind of ambitious toddler is being paraded around Dorchester right now? Turns out it was just a well-meaning HelloFresh salesman trying to get people during the dinner hour.
I do like the idea of kids going like days earlier looking for like the full-size candy bars before they're pillaged by all the
Exactly. Like, we know you did this early.
That's a great idea. We have other things to talk about beyond candy, though at the very end of this episode, we're going to talk so much about candy because we have so much good candy data. But first, we actually have a little bit of other, horse racy kind of politicsy sort of mathy things to do. So, Jen, what do you say? Should we get into it?
I'm sorry. I would like to make a brief play for the Massachusetts themed, not candy related, but heist related thing that has been absorbing all of my time and mental energy recently. Steve.
Perhaps because I'm in Kenya, I'm not aware of the Massachusetts link to heist behavior. So what happened?
Well, yes. For one thing, I was not anywhere near the Louvre when, some things were stolen by some creative and enterprising thieves. I would like to make that very, very clear. But John and I did go and see The Mastermind, which is the new Kelly Reichardt movie, and it is based in Framingham, Massachusetts, and involves the theft of several pieces of art from the Framingham Art Museum, and the fallout from that. It is absolutely incredible, very downtrodden, classic sort of charismatic and yet messy and sad Massachusetts man at the center of the film. It's delightful, Steve. I am just so thrilled that the Massachusetts art thievery universe has a film entrant here.
Yeah, well, initially when you said that there was a link to the Massachusetts political world, I was thinking you were going to tell me that like a state rep had been arrested for the Louvre heist or something like that.
No, but we should bring Anthony Amore in as a local film critic.
Yeah. For those of you who have not been with us since the beginning, Anthony Amore is, of course, the current and longtime head of security for the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum and also a former candidate for statewide office and a many-time guest of the horse race. I feel like we've given him a title and probably a Lifetime Achievement Award at this point, but he is a good friend of the horse race and somebody who knows a lot about art heists.
Yeah, and he should come on and tell me what he thinks of the mastermind. This is the open invitation. But aside from that, thank you for giving me my little film corner. Longtime listeners are probably relieved that I wasn't suggesting there was some kind of bachelorette connection to the political world right now, so you're welcome.
We could do Love is Blind. There's a new Love is Blind season, Jen.
You know what? I learned this from you today. I was today years old when I learned that there is a new Love is Blind season, Steve.
I still blame Stephanie Murray, our longtime co-host, for foisting that particular bit of TV trash on us.
Absolutely.
But Jen, we have things to do. Unfortunately, we can't spend all of our time talking about film and television, though maybe we should. But we have two things. We've got a new election poll, a new type of election night poll to talk about. And then we actually have a whole bunch of mayoral races, because even though the one in Boston is essentially a foregone conclusion, there's lots of other interesting ones around Massachusetts. So should we get into it?
Let's go.
Oh, come on. I was so hopeful.
And today in polling news, for not just you, dear listeners, but me, who basically knows nothing about this, we have a new source of information for election night results. So the Social Science Research Solutions firm, or SSRS, has announced that they'll be conducting new exit polling for the 2025 elections in a few different cities and states. So that's going to be in New York City, in Virginia, in New Jersey, and California. And Steve, that's about what I know about this. Why is this important? Why is this interesting?
Yeah, it is interesting in a bunch of different ways, but basically to set the scene a little bit, for decades, really, up until just very recent years, there was one set of election polls, and it was basically done by what was called the National Elections Pool, which was a bunch of different media outlets who would come together and fund this very expensive, very extensive polling that happened all over America on election night. And because nearly everybody voted on election day, it was literally an exit poll where people would stand at the exits with clipboards, the exits to particular selected precincts, and ask, who did you vote for? You know, what issues are important to you? And all the questions that you're used to seeing there in the exit poll data. Then just maybe the last 3 cycles or so, there was a new set of election day data, which was from the Associated Press and NORC and Fox, basically, were the firms that were the groups that were the most involved in it. And what they did was quite different, because they did these enormous samples, including a lot of online and phone polling with people who voted early and even on election day. So they were getting, tens and tens of thousands of interviews, and interviews, importantly, from all 50 states. Because when you're doing an exit poll, basically you can't go to all 50 states. It just costs too much, and everybody knows that the Democrats going to win Massachusetts by 30, so we don't really need to send people out to Framingham and Melrose to learn that the Democrat won Massachusetts. So what's interesting about this one is that it's actually a combination of the firm that did the exit polls for decades, that's Edison, and a bunch of the news organizations that used to be in the National Elections Pool, and the methodology that was used by this Votecast and Fox News and AP thing. So it's kind of all coming back together into what seems to be one entity, rather than having these kind of 2 parallel ones, which we've had for the last couple cycles.
And to do a little bit of groundwork laying here, so there are a few different things that we learn during the course of election night. Of course, we'll see kind of unofficial vote tallies come in through City Hall, through poll watchers. As a longtime journalist in the area, major organizations will sometimes send out their own people to go get vote counts at what are called, bellwether polling stations, or ones that tend to be significant or informative about the way that a neighborhood or a city or a region might go. But when you, as a pollster, are watching election night coverage, you're not just looking for who won. You're looking for who won where. You're looking for kind of the underlying demographics of those areas to see what kind of broader themes you can pull out. And of course, the journalists are too, but we're looking at it from kind of picking out the most newsworthy element of it. So what do you look for in like a good election night poll?
Yeah, there's kind of, I guess, several different purposes for election night polling, or several different purposes that I think people use them for that day. And ones that you can't necessarily learn as well or as quickly by looking at vote returns. The biggest one is just why people voted specific ways. If we can make all kinds of conjecture and we can look at pre-election polls, but what an election day or election night poll lets you do is you can ask voters, say for Donald Trump or for Kamala Harris, what key factors were influenced your vote, and then see among voters who voted on, say, inflation, how many voted for Trump, how many voted for Harris, how many voted for Senate candidate A versus Senate candidate B. A secondary purpose then is demographics, because you can learn some things from just looking at the map. And if you know kind of where different demographic groups live in Massachusetts, you can see, for example, like neighborhoods with many more Black voters voted more for Harris. Neighborhoods with many more Latino voters seem to have swung to the right. White liberal voters seem to have gone this way and that way, but you can't really get a firm sense without, knowing, like, this is a Black voter and they said they voted for Harris. This is a Latino voter. Here's who they said they voted for, and so forth. So that's another purpose of exit polls. And then the third one that is probably the most conspicuous is to give TV and internet talking heads something to do on election day, starting at like 5 p.m. when the very first data, historically at least, would be shared with network anchors. So before that, those collecting this data are basically quarantined. Like, you can't share this with anybody. You can't say anything to anybody because, nobody loves a rumor and gossip more than political operatives, so any little bit of information that would have come out before that could just, kind of mushroom.
Yeah. And I mean, of course, part of that as well is around that window, many of the polls are still open all across the country. And so there is that sort of broader question about how much news or punditry or kind of political mobilization should be trying to kind of acknowledge and or tamper with and or influence and or just observe kind of the voting that is ongoing at the time. And so again, you have those dual interests of people are turning on their TVs. They just got back from work. They're interested in learning some things about how the election is going. But then there's also that dissonance where it's like, yeah, man, you got 3 more hours of voting to do. Just because it's the 5 o'clock news doesn't mean that people aren't still heading out.
Right. And that's a really good point, because what they don't do at the 5 p.m., the 5 p.m. data, share is call anything or say even who's winning on anything. They'll pick some very innocuous numbers to share that everybody will try to read too much into, like, how important was the economy to your vote decision or something like that. And then people will try to think, okay, well, if the economy is important, that's good for candidate A or B and so forth. But that does actually bring the other main point from the sponsor's standpoint of why these polls are done, which is to help them make calls. So when the polls close, then you see this sort of flood of projections, like candidate A won this state or this race or this office. Candidate B won this other one. Donald Trump won this slate of red states. Kamala Harris won this slate of blue states. And sometimes you'll see calls on states that people thought would take much longer and would be much closer. And those are based very often on the data from these surveys, as well as, what might be available in terms of election returns. But these exit polls and VoteCast, and now this new thing with SSRS and Edison, are very important for when networks decide to make these projections.
And there is this broader question, right, about how micro you can go with these, looking at where this new exit polling is going to happen. It's the entire state of Virginia. It's the entire state of New Jersey. It's the state of California. And then, of course, New York City, which is very much in everyone's mind right now. Not a state, a city, as its name would imply, but absolutely massive and basically seen as this massive referendum on kind of the fate of the Democratic Party here, as Zohran Mamdani is the front runner and running as the Democratic nominee, but of course facing former Governor Andrew Cuomo, who is running as an independent, but is also kind of being portrayed as a reflection of this sort of establishment Democratic Party at the same time. So that makes a lot of sense why there would be hyper focus on that particular city, but there's not an indication that it's going to be like we're going to see hyper local Kansas City specific polling in the future. That probably wouldn't be a very economical use of resources.
I mean, it'd be cool if there were. Like, I don't, the release doesn't say anything about it, and it would be new if that sort of thing were to happen. But I do love the idea of sometime down the road, when we once again have a competitive race in Boston, that we might get something like this. Because if we don't have it, then we basically are going off pre-election polls, which are fine and often, do a good job. But, it's just a different level of kind of interest and intricacy that you can get there. But it is good. And, there has been significant progress in terms of the granularity of the data that we do have access to, because there were years and years and years where Massachusetts had nothing, and then with the advent of VoteCast and, a lot more online, a lot more phone, a lot more like early voting and so forth. Now we do always have an exit poll with thousands of cases in it. So we can learn what voters cared about over time, how demographics shifted, who voted more for, Maura Healey and so forth and so on. So hopefully this new partnership will continue that. And maybe someday we'll have, Melrose, Melrose mayor exit polls, though. Probably not. I'll just say probably not.
That was what I was going to ask, which is, are you going to be staying up till 3 a.m. Kenya time to try frantically on either, the artist formerly known as Twitter or Blue Sky, or just refreshing whatever election site you can to, figure out how Melrose's municipal elections are going, Steve?
I mean, last time there was literally nothing. Like,
right.
There was nothing posted at all. There was no news. There was nothing on the city website. It was just somebody, eventually found the data and kind of sent it out. So I don't even know what I would refresh if I wanted to know. But there is a big override in Melrose, and we just got our absentee voter instructions, so we'll be participating, of course. But results. No idea. No idea how to find out how the city voted.
Well, I look forward to you finding out at some point in November, an undisclosed time, how that all went in Melrose.
And on we go then with municipal elections, and we have a mayoral election roundup. It's an odd year, as it says here in the script, which is both philosophically true and also literally true, and that means municipal elections. This is the last podcast before Election Day, which is November 4th, the general election, and there are several mayoral races that do not just have the whiff of inevitability for the incumbents. Not sure what that refers to. You can take from that what you will. So let's get into those, Jen. But first, let's deal with the least mysterious outcome with a large whiff of inevitability, and that is Boston.
That's right. It would be a little bit silly if we began the mayoral election roundup without acknowledging that, as we have before, Boston is not really mysterious here. It is very much Michelle Wu is walking into her second term. We are just acknowledging that in case, again, you are one of the few people out there just waiting for the horse race to say who is going to be mayor of Boston with one actual candidate in the running for the general election. Michelle Wu will be mayor of Boston.
Yeah, I think we're ready to make that.
That's the reality.
We're ready to make that projection even without exit poll data.
That's right. I don't think it's responsible before 5 p.m., but, I feel like our prediction were held.
We'll do it. We'll do it in this one case. But then let's head out of the hub. Let's get on the Pike. Let's get on 93. Whatever will take us to the places where there are other interesting mayoral elections. So, Jen, you have a couple queued up here, and also the reporters who have been focusing on these. So let's first head down to Brockton. What's going on in Brockton?
Right. And the reason that I wanted to start with this is that it is a notable open race that still has sort of an incumbent question to it here. So Mayor Bill Carpenter died of a heart attack in 2019, and before Mayor Robert Sullivan was firmly elected to replace him, the six-term councilor at large, Moises Rodriguez, was basically subbing in for Mayor Bill Carpenter, basically to fill out the end of that term. So Rodriguez, who's the executive director of the Cape Verdean Association of Brockton, and of course a councilor at large, is now running officially for that seat that he held briefly in the interim. He is running along with Jean-Bradley de Renoncourt, who is a Democrat and another at-large city councilor in Brockton, who is also a correctional officer at the Norfolk County Sheriff's Office. So again, they are running to replace Mayor Robert Sullivan, who decided not to run again.
Okay, so for those who are feeling a bit lost in a sea of names right now, what is the significance of this election in a broader context?
There's two, basically. One of them is that Brockton, like many other cities and towns in Massachusetts, has really been feeling the pinch from years of financial woes, homelessness, housing, those kinds of big macro issues. There is also sort of the meta question here, which is after this 8-person prelim was narrowed down, this would be the first time that Brockton has actually elected a person of color to be mayor. So that is not kind of the overriding question. Either of these men would be the first person of color elected mayor because they came out on top of the preliminary, but that is a notable event in a city that is basically 3/4 non-white. So that's a first there. And then on the other side, they're kind of dealing with these big questions of how do you deal with the homelessness issue here in the housing crunch. We know that it's very difficult to build housing. And so one of the areas of disagreement or a bit of dispute between them would be how they feel about this ordinance that was vetoed by the current mayor who's leaving that would prohibit loitering and camping on public property, which has basically been decried as essentially an anti-homelessness bill or effort. And so Rodriguez, who has been on the council and did support this measure, says that he does think that this is a good part of the solution to homelessness around the city, whereas de Renoncourt says that these punitive measures are not the best approach, and we would rather be focusing on kind of building new housing and social supports. So even within what might look like a fairly straightforward campaign on the outside to replace an outgoing mayor, there are some pretty significant differences in the way that these two city councilors are approaching their municipal questions.
Yeah, and I think illustrative of, what by any measure is the biggest issue facing Massachusetts these days, which is the housing crisis, and this is one of the effects of not dealing with it or dealing with it perhaps inadequately in recent years and recent decades, is it leaves us here. It leaves us with a growing homelessness population. So from there, we're going to head back into Boston, then get on 93 and get off at the Assembly Row exit in East Somerville and kind of wander through Somerville talking about the Somerville mayoral election. So Jen, why is Somerville on the list?
Somerville is on the list because we don't have a vulnerable incumbent. We have an incumbent who's already been booted here. So Mayor Katiana Ballantyne did not make it onto the November ballot at all, only getting 23% of the vote in the preliminary, and she is the only incumbent to be out at the prelim stage at this point. And this is unusual because voters have been pretty dissatisfied with the mayor's office. There have been issues about transparency, how well the mayor's office has kind of met and dealt with the emerging crises in Somerville and other places, housing being one of them, of course, but there wasn't a major scandal or anything, and it is pretty unusual for a sitting mayor to be out after 2 terms, especially because she's following Joe Curtatone, who was mayor of Somerville for 18 years. So we are starting the general election with no incumbent in the picture in Somerville, which is odd.
So then who is on the docket?
We've got City Councilor Jake Wilson and Willie Burnley Jr. So this again, we've got a city councilor that's a well-known entity in Somerville. And then Burnley, if elected, would, this is going to sound familiar, not only be the city's first Black mayor, but also a democratic socialist here. So we are again seeing kind of these echoes of the broader conversation in democratic circles in blue cities about what it means in Massachusetts if you want to kind of improve the level of affordable housing, but then also sort of stake out territory against, say, cooperating with ICE and kind of staking out a pro-teachers union platform. So we will see how all of those questions get resolved on November 4th. But Somerville, no incumbent advantage there.
Yeah, quite unusual, as we talked about last week in Massachusetts, or really anywhere, for incumbents to lose. Not unheard of course, but to be eliminated in the prelim is quite unusual. So from there, we're not going to try to drive to Taunton. We're just going to get in a helicopter because driving would take much longer than we have for this segment. So Jen, we are now in Taunton through the magic of modern technology. What's going on there?
We are now entering what I would kind of call the incumbents on the edge section of our roundup, starting with Taunton, where Mayor Shauna O'Connell is running against City Councilor Estelle Borges. O'Connell was arrested and given a 6-month probation on assault and battery on a family member. This sentence has been served. This is actually not just about that sentence, but it's also a rematch election because, as we know, municipal elections are basically just one big game of musical chairs. You are either a councilor or a school committee member, or you're the mayor, or you cycle around, or you're an alderman, whatever makes you happy in whichever seat you can grab. So back in 2019, O'Connell actually beat out Borges 62 to 36%. But in the years since, Borges has actually become the highest vote getter on the city council. So not only do I love saying names, I love just saying numbers to people. So the last election in 2023, the Muni, the mayor, Shauna O'Connell, got 5,276 votes for mayor, and Borges, though, on the city council got 5,155. So really, really close in terms of how much of the city is in favor of these two candidates or familiar with them. And that was before the 2024 arrest. So that means, of course, that Borges is running on a platform that the city should have a mayor it can be proud of, and O'Connell is pointing to the work on municipal infrastructure, maintaining low tax levels. So incumbent is not safe. A lot has changed. This is a fairly popular city councilor, but also you've got a good old-fashioned scandal.
Okay, and you mentioned Taunton as being the leading edge of the incumbents on the edge segment. So getting past the leading edge, who else is on that list? What other cities have incumbent mayors on the edge?
So in Gloucester, the mayor, Greg Verga, actually came in second in the preliminary election to City Councilor Paul Lumberg. This is one where recent teacher strikes have become a big flashpoint. Verga himself is a former elected mayor of the school committee. So that has become a very striking issue in areas like Gloucester. In Lawrence, you have the incumbent mayor, Brian DePina, who is kind of dealing with fallout from the way that elections were held last year. The Secretary of State, William Galvin, said that his office determined that the city's election department received absentee ballot applications and ballots that were not from voters named on these applications. So there were issues essentially with the election process. And so the Secretary of State office is actually supervising Lawrence's election department this fall as the incumbent tries to be reelected. Then in Everett, we have other kind of state level issues that are trickling in here because the state inspector general's office found that the state had overpaid Mayor Carlos de Maria $180,000 in bonuses since 2016 and basically pushed the city council to recoup the money from him. So the incumbent mayor is facing a challenge from a city councilor, Robert Van Kampen, where that has been a major issue. So these kind of 4 cities, I think, are interesting examples of the different ways that mayors can appear vulnerable. And this is, of course, no guarantee that any of them fail to kind of pull it out in the last minute, but you can be dealing with a very hyper municipal scandal. You can be dealing with kind of fallout from housing issues that are crossing the entire state, or, you can just not run an election well. Boston itself has gotten kind of a smack on the hand from the state over the way that it handled municipal elections just 2 years ago. So all of those are here, making everything feel very complicated. Incumbents are not guaranteed a return to their spot in these particular spaces. Of course, most of them are absolutely safe.
All right. Well, next week, we'll take a look at the results and we'll be able to tell you how many of these incumbents survived. But for now, we'll be right back.
I'm Zainab Asma Doyle, Research Director at the Massing Polling Group. The Massing Polling Group serves the region's leading foundations, political groups, government entities, and businesses. Our surveys and focus groups bring high-quality data to the toughest questions facing society today. Learn more at massingpolling.com.
And that brings us to our final segment, which this week is brought to you by our Type 2 Diabetes Department here at the Horse Race Global Media Empire headquarters. This report is from Instacart, and it's obviously about Halloween candy because it will be Halloween tomorrow as you're listening to this, because of course you listen to the episode the very moment that it drops. Jen, I'm looking at a map. It's multicolored. Tell us about the study that went into this.
So Instacart basically did an analysis of candy share by weight sold on its platform in each state as compared to the nation overall, and then found that the candy that had the greatest difference between the state and national share of weight was the candy that these states preferred above all other states in the country. Massachusetts, along with New York and New Hampshire, really likes a Sour Patch Kid.
Yeah, I thought that was interesting because I certainly don't mind Sour Patch Kids, or didn't mind them as a kid when I, used to eat more candy than I do now. But I don't really think of them as like, this is the locally relevant candy that everybody eats more than anywhere else. So I thought that was pretty interesting. We also share our affinity for Sour Patch Kids with both Texas and Colorado. But there's also some other interesting ones, some deeply offensive ones, like we've got candy corn, which was the favorite candy of several states, and peanut M&Ms, actually, for your former home state of Utah.
Yeah, that's right. I'm actually feeling very seen by both of my former home states, both Almond Joy in California, which I absolutely love, and then peanut M&Ms in Utah. So we just love, I guess, a chocolate covered nut. That's great.
Yeah.
Love it.
Yeah.
Keep it simple.
No, I like both of those. We're going to have to send some of our reporters out to Nebraska and Kansas and also down to Mississippi to explore what on God's earth is going on with this candy corn fixation, because something's got to be done.
It's true. I also am really fascinated by the Tootsie Rolls versus Tootsie Pops.
Yeah, what's going on there?
Situation.
What do we think?
So like Maine and Oklahoma say yes, Tootsie Pops, whereas Wyoming and Arizona are more in favor of Tootsie Rolls. So I don't know what to tell you guys. Is it just the hard shell? Is it the time it takes to consume it? I just have questions.
That's very possible. But I will say, Jen, that I would guess that you're an expert on these issues because you have lived in Utah. And looking at one of the other bits of data that they produced for this was basically how much more or less candy per person does each state buy. And Massachusetts is slightly below average, 3.5% below average. Utah is 51% above average in terms of the amount of candy by weight that each person in Utah buys. So, Jennifer Smith, we have called you for comment. What's going on there?
Oh, no, I'm not going to be invited back. I mean, so it's because, like, you're not supposed to have the other fun stuff, Steve. It's very much because, thinking about kind of like Utah culture and thinking about, members of the Church of Latter-day Saints or Mormons, not such big fans of alcohol and caffeine. I do not, in fact, support this anti-caffeine and alcohol stance, but that is true. And so that's why you'll see so many, people just absolutely obsessed with Diet Coke. But that, of course, is the non-sugar option, though it does taste sweet. So you'll see a lot more kind of vices in terms of sugary snacks. But I will also say for the record, there's like a really cool chocolate culture out there. So there's a lot of like really good locally made chocolate staples. And I definitely eat more chocolate when I'm out there because it's good.
All All right, well, everybody out there, send us your candy data viz, and we'll report it next week exclusively here on The Horse Race. Unfortunately, that is all the time we have for today. I'm Steve Casella, signing off with Jennifer Smith. Our production and theme music is done by Charlie Casella. You can write to us at thehorseracepodcast@gmail.com or send us your uneaten bag of Halloween candy. Don't forget to give The Horse Race a review wherever you're hearing us now. Subscribe to Commonwealth Beacon's daily download and reach out to us here at the Massing Polling Group if you need polls or focus groups done. For now, thank you all for listening, and we'll see you next week.